Today's story starts with a man about to get fired, and a badge that could expose everything. Stick around till the end, it's worth it. And if you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing. Hope you enjoy it. I was already standing in the big glass conference room at Northbridge Health, manila envelope in my hand, while Bryn Ashford acted like I was an Outlook alert she couldn't swipe away fast enough. She didn't even look up from her tablet. "Security can walk him out when we finish here," she said into her headset, like she was ordering a Diet Coke. Dorian Kessler sat across the table with that same tired face he wore during ethics briefings. He had a stack of paperwork, NDA, severance, the usual, and the defeated look of a man who wanted to be somewhere else, anywhere else. There was a chair waiting for me at the end of the table. I didn't take it. I stepped up and placed the envelope down in front of Dorian, careful, like I wasn't holding something that could burn the floor beneath us. Bryn finally glanced up. She gave me that empty, polite smile she used on all the old hands she'd been quietly shoving out the door for the last 6 months. "Your role in clinical compliance doesn't fit the future of the brand," she said, like she was reading off a note card. I didn't move. "Then I'll explain the part of the brand you're trying to erase, starting with what this badge actually means." I tapped the red stripe on my ID, clipped to my belt. She barely blinked. "Get his signature," she told Dorian, already turning back to her screen. "Or call security. I've got real work in 10 minutes. I looked at my badge again. 10-year-old photo, corners worn down from too many night shifts and forgotten elevators. You don't get a red stripe for clocking hours. You earn it by being the one person in the room they forget about. Until you don't. If they were going to toss me like a broken printer, they were at least going to hear why the floor under them was already cracking. So I took a breath, turned toward Dorian, and started talking. Not about the envelope yet, not even about Bryn. About a surgeon with a conscience, a collapsed ceiling, and a mistake I've been trying to fix ever since the night a patient and a nurse didn't make it home. Before we go deeper, quick note, share in the comments where you're watching from, and let's continue. "You remember Kincaid?" I asked, already knowing they did. "Before the slogans, before the rebrands, he gave me this badge and told me if I ever saw it happening again, I'd know what to do." Dorian shifted in his chair. I leaned in. "You're not just pushing out compliance, you're firing the fuse that's already lit." Then I pulled out a chair and sat down like I had all day. "I didn't grow up behind a desk," I told them. "I started in the back of ambulances, nights mostly, before my knees started complaining louder than the sirens. I didn't say it to impress them. I said it because I needed them to understand the distance I'd traveled just to end up in that room. Back then, I saw Northbridge hospitals from the outside. I'd pull up to the ER bay and watch what happened after we handed a patient off. Some nurses moved like they were shot out of a gun. Others barely looked up. And the ones who listened, really listened. I remembered those faces. The first time I got called into a mortality review, I was just there to answer one question about transport timing. But I kept asking more. Why wasn't this caught earlier? Who signed off on that chart? Most people gave me side eyes, waiting for someone to shut me up. Instead, Dr. Amos Kincaid walked over after the meeting and asked if I had a minute. He didn't look like the kind of guy who handed out praise. I figured I'd pissed him off. But he took me down the hall, handed me a binder full of policies, and told me to show up the next morning for an audit meeting. That was the start of everything. Kincaid had built Northbridge from the bones of some struggling clinics out west. No PR teams, no slogans, just clean charts, working boilers, and a fat binder for every process you could name. The man didn't care about style. He cared about things running right. Under him, the system wasn't flashy, but it was steady. We had breakdowns, sure, but we fixed them. We didn't ignore them to hit a number. Then came Cal Riggins. Cal was a regional director with a slick haircut and a taste for fast wins. One year, he steered a hospital remodel to a contractor who owed him favors. Cheap drywall, rushed wiring, all signed off with smiles. That winter, a recovery wing ceiling collapsed during a storm. A nurse and a patient were crushed. A few others were lucky to crawl out. We never released the internal photos, but I still remember them. Plaster soaked through, blood on the tiles, and one stretcher that looked like it had been folded in half. Kincaid flew out the next morning, met the families, came back quiet and older. I thought for sure I was getting canned for missing something in the pre-Reno walkthrough. He called me into his office and locked the door. "You didn't miss the signs," he said. "You just didn't have the right tools to see all of them." Then he opened his desk drawer and slid something across the table. A badge. Looked like mine, except the stripe was a dark red, almost maroon. "This is Sentinel," he said. "Every time you badge into a restricted room, it logs who's there and what's on the screens. Sends it outside the system. Quietly. I didn't even know that was possible. I asked if the board signed off on that. They signed off on not being blindsided again, he said. They just didn't ask how we'd do it. That was the moment. No ceremony, no speech. Just a badge and a blunt truth. He told me I had one job: make sure the next big screw-up didn't get buried under meetings and excuses. He didn't need someone liked. He needed someone immune. I didn't tell Bryn any of this while I sat there, but it was right under the surface. Because the truth was, a year before Cal's ceiling came down, I'd already messed up. There was a medication labeling problem, small, but real. Could have caused harm if anyone else had handled it. I let the chief pharmacist keep it off the books. Told myself it wasn't worth the fallout. I hated that choice every day after. Kincaid never mentioned it, never hinted he knew. But I think he did. That red-striped badge wasn't just a tool, it was a second chance. For years I wore it quietly. Sat in boardrooms and budget reviews like wallpaper. I was the guy nobody remembered was even there, until they checked the access logs. Sentinel caught things people thought no one was watching. Late-night approvals, budget swaps, closed-door whispers that didn't make the official minutes. And then one day, Kincaid announced his retirement, said he wanted to fish more, sit in the sun. He left quietly, with no ceremony, just like he lived. After that, everything shifted. The board hired a firm to help find a visionary. They wanted energy, buzzwords, someone who could make headlines and TED Talks. They didn't want steady hands anymore. They wanted disruption. That's when they found her. And I swear, the minute Bryn Ashford stepped off that elevator, I knew we were headed for something loud, bright, and dangerous. The first time I saw her, Bryn Ashford was standing under the fluorescence like she was about to unveil the cure for gravity. She wore this tailored electric blue suit, hair back, heels sharp enough to puncture tires. She didn't walk into the headquarters. She claimed it. She started the staff meeting with some line about reimagining care journeys like she'd just discovered broken bones and ventilators last week. Said we were no longer a hospital system, but a health experience ecosystem. I looked down the row and saw one of our senior respiratory therapists rubbing his temples like the phrase gave him an actual headache. She had all the right words: synergy, value moments, digital elevation, but none of the right pauses. Every sentence sounded like a pitch deck. By the time she hit slide number 30, even the interns were zoning out. 2 weeks later, department chiefs who'd spent decades building this place were quietly shown the door. No announcements, no handshakes. Just new names on the office doors the next morning. In came people who couldn't tell a sterile field from a serving tray, but could make a mean Canva presentation. Jace Holloway was the first one I met up close. New head of operations. Big smile, shiny teeth, no actual background in medicine. He told me he loved metrics and wanted to make Northbridge a living dashboard. I asked him once if he'd ever been in an OR during a code. He laughed like I'd asked if he'd milked a cow. Then there was Skylar Boone, fresh from some tech company with experience in his title and zero weight behind his words. He strutted through our ER like it was a hotel lobby, complimenting the ambiance and asking if we'd considered scented diffusers for emotional regulation. A nurse asked him if he wanted to regulate the stench from a GI bleed. He blinked and said maybe eucalyptus. But the first change I really felt wasn't strategic. It was in the staff lounge. Our old coffee pot was gone, replaced by sleek chrome machines that made you scan a QR code and sit through a 30-second Northbridge 2.0 ad before they'd cough up a half-warm cup. One morning I stood there, arms crossed, watching Bryn's face on a tiny screen tell me about joy at work, while a resident next to me muttered that he hadn't had a weekend off in 11 months. That's when I knew this wasn't a rebuild. It was a branding play. We weren't fixing the system, we were selling it. I went back to my office and started digging. Maintenance requests that used to be auto-approved were getting temporarily deferred. Line items for monitor calibrations, ventilator checks, defibrillator servicing, all frozen. Meanwhile, payments were flying out to some newly created clinical optimization firm based out of a tiny island jurisdiction better known for hiding tax shelters than supporting patient safety. I pulled every invoice and ran the vendor IDs. No vetting trail, no compliance sign-off. When I walked them into Jace's office, he gave me this tight-lipped grin like I'd caught him sneaking out of a party early. At our new scale, he said like he was talking to a child, compliance needs to be more flexible. I told him patient safety doesn't get flexible. I said any group handling sensitive systems needs to pass our baseline screen, at minimum. Bryn approved the contract herself, he said, standing up like that ended the conversation. If you want to keep your team, I'd focus on adding value instead of throwing sand in the gears. I walked out of there calm, but the old knot in my gut was back. Same one I felt before Cal's ceiling came down. That quiet warning deep in the stomach that says something ugly is hiding under the paint. So I shut my door, opened up the Sentinel logs, and started flagging anything that smelled like it skipped our normal channels. Purchases, approvals, meeting invites with too few names and too much power. I copied the file hashes into a document only I could access, plain labels, timestamps, clean trails. I didn't know where it would lead yet, but I wasn't about to let it vanish when the next reorg came through. From my office window, I watched the beige hallways I used to trust fill up with bright posters covered in buzzwords. Elevate the moment. Human first healing. Trust the journey. Except the journey looked a lot like a train car headed off a bridge, while everyone up front was clinking glasses and tweeting about innovation. It was a Thursday night, sometime after 11, when my personal phone lit up. I almost didn't answer. I was halfway through a stiff drink and trying not to think about work. But something about the number, local, unfamiliar, made me pick up. It was a charge nurse from one of our older sites, her voice shaky, but trying hard not to sound panicked. "I'm sorry for calling your personal number," she said fast. But we didn't know who else to reach. One of our ICU vents failed, completely shut down. I was already pulling on jeans. She kept talking. RT's bagging him by hand. We couldn't find a backup on the same floor. Another nurse is running to surgery to grab a transport unit. I asked if the patient was still alive. "For now," she whispered. By the time I got there, about 40 minutes later, the man was stable. Barely. But the whole unit felt like it was holding its breath. You could see it in the eyes of the night staff, that wide, quiet look people get after they've just stopped something from becoming a headline. Hank Roscoe met me near the stairwell. Same grease-stained hoodie he always wore when things broke down. Same smell of coffee and machine oil. He didn't even say hello. "I asked for parts for that unit in June," he muttered. "I've been running maintenance with duct tape and prayers." I asked who denied the request. "Don't know," he said. "Got an email saying we're stretching life cycles because leadership's focused on building a digital front door." I looked at him. What on earth is that supposed to mean? He shrugged, wiped his hands on a rag, and said, "I guess it looks better on a quarterly slide than fixing what people breathe through." I badged into the incident debrief 2 hours later. Small glass room, quiet clicks from laptops, that cold fluorescent hum. Sentinel started its logging as soon as I scanned in. Jace dialed in from wherever he was. Looked like a hotel room, button down, open at the neck, glass of something expensive just off frame. First thing out of his mouth was, "Let's explore the process variation that led to this unexpected equipment outcome." Not the words I wanted to hear. I asked the finance rep why Hank's capital request had been denied. She blinked at the screen and said they'd never received one. Hank, sitting beside me, just stared through her like she didn't exist. After the meeting, I went back to my office and dug through Sentinel's captures. Logs, screen views, forwarded emails. I found it. Jace had taken Hank's original request, forwarded it into a Slack-style side thread tied to Bryn's innovation project, and joked about playing chicken with the equipment curve. That was the moment I stopped collecting and started documenting. I filled out a Sentinel event report, one of the real ones. The kind that flags top-level risk, forces a review, and usually triggers involvement from external reviewers. No sugarcoating, no passive language. Just what happened, when it happened, and who held the bag when it blew up. A couple hours later, Dorian called me. Not from his office, from his personal cell. "Listen," he said, voice low. "Bryn's team saw the report. They're asking if this could be reclassified as a Tier 2 quality concern." "They want it downgraded?" I asked. "It's just a conversation right now," he said. "Just think about it." I did, for about 10 seconds. Long enough to picture that man's chest rising while a therapist squeezed a rubber bag like her life depended on it. Long enough to remember the incident I once let slide, years back, and how that decision still stuck to me like ash. "No," I said. "Not this time." I copied the full report to our outside auditors in Toronto, locked it with a private code, and added a short cover line. Systemic failure related to denied maintenance funding. Independent review required. I knew what that meant. I'd seen it before. Once that report left our firewall, I wasn't just the guy in compliance anymore. I was the guy with a matchbox in his pocket. Later that week, someone from tech slipped me the transcript from a strategy huddle between Bryn and Jace, one they thought was off record. I read it 3 times. They laughed. Not just once, twice. "One close call saves us what, 20 grand?" Jace said. "Worth it," Bryn replied. "As long as the dashboard stays pretty." That was when I stopped wondering how far they'd go, and started preparing for how far I'd have to. Back in that glass box of a conference room, I looked straight at Bryn and Dorian and said, After the ventilator night, I stopped treating Sentinel like a backup system, started keeping my own plain English log. They didn't interrupt, which told me they were listening harder than they looked. I told them how I started flagging everything, strange approvals, budget gaps, meetings that went quiet once the agenda hit certain line items. No jargon, no code, just clear notes with names, dates, and what smelled wrong. Right around then, Tessa Quinn from HR showed up in my doorway, grinning like she'd just won a raffle. She held up her tablet and said, "Hey, we're finally switching to touchless biometric badges. Need your old one for sustainability tracking." She stepped closer, eyes on my belt. "That red stripe's kinda retro, huh? Classic compliance vibes." She reached for it, laughing like it was a joke. My hand closed over the badge before I even thought about it. Not aggressive, just firm. "I'm mid-review," I told her. "I'll bring it down once I'm done." She tilted her head, said something about old codes deactivating by Friday, then floated off like nothing had happened. But the second she left, it hit me. If that badge got shut off, Sentinel's access log would go dark. Everything I'd recorded, rooms, screens, voice triggers, would die with it. Worse, it would leave a perfect hole, one they could fill however they wanted. So I stopped waiting for invites and started crashing meetings. Didn't matter what they were. Risk reviews, budget syncs, those fake collaboration labs Skylar kept hosting. I'd badge in, sit quiet, and let Sentinel collect the screen data and presence logs while I made simple notes in my shadow file. Names, topics. Who looked nervous? One meeting stuck with me. Skylar was droning on about brand alignment when Bryn leaned toward him and said, "We need a clean transition program. Something gentle that nudges older nurses into voluntary retirement, new faces, new energy, makes the staff photos feel more modern." Tessa was in the back of the room taking notes on her tablet. When Bryn started talking about subtle friction, making benefits just annoying enough to push people out, Tessa's smile flickered. I didn't say a word. I just badged in, let Sentinel do its thing, and walked out when the session ended. That night, I was about to shut down my computer when Lila called. "You seen the new clip?" "What clip?" "Bryn's keynote. She's trending again, talking about sweeping away outdated mindsets in healthcare. I found it online, slick camera angles, paid applause, one-liners about pioneering the future. It wasn't just internal hype anymore. They were turning it into a movement. I opened a blank drive I kept off network and started organizing everything. Invoice trails, badge logs, redacted memos, my summaries, each file labeled clearly, so that even if someone dropped it in court 3 years from now, they'd understand what they were looking at. 2 days later, Tessa caught me in the stairwell. She wasn't bouncing this time. Her voice was tight, quiet. "Hey, can I ask you something? Is it normal for a manager's bonus to go up when they finalize a severance package?" I didn't blink. "What did you see?" "Something weird in a review spreadsheet. Looked like payouts were tied to package counts. I wasn't sure if—" "Keep hard copies," I said. "Anything that makes your stomach twist, print it and save it where they don't know." She nodded slowly, eyes searching mine like she wanted a promise I couldn't give. I didn't offer her safety, just truth. "Memories are cheap," I said. "Paper talks louder." After that, she started showing up less at those meetings. More time around the actual staff wings, clipboard in hand, eyes sharper than before. The next time I walked past her desk, I saw a binder sitting half-hidden behind a monitor. Paper tabs, no digital copy in sight. Smart girl. The echo from my talk with Tessa was still bouncing around in my head when the system-wide memo hit. "Effective immediately," it read. "Clinical compliance will report to the Department of Communications and Public Engagement." I read it 3 times. Out loud. Thought maybe I was overtired or seeing things. Communications, not medical, not legal, not operations, comms. Overnight, my direct reporting line to the chief medical officer disappeared, replaced by some VP named Nadia who used phrases like brand reputation strategy and sentiment alignment. I knew right then what this was. A kill move in soft focus. The next thing to go was my access. Dashboards I had built myself started flashing error messages. Files I'd maintained for years, incident data, audit trails, came back locked, flagged under new governance structures. Even Sentinel logs started showing restricted lines. I went to IT, asked what changed. One of the junior techs, a guy I trusted, gave me a look that said he couldn't say much, but he mumbled, "Jace's team did a security sweep. Said it was to cut down on data clutter. You'll have to file requests now through his admin." That meant I had to ask permission from the same people screwing everything up just to see the evidence of it. So I stopped trying to work through the front door. I started printing any report I got my hands on. Incident notifications, service logs, maintenance backlogs. I hit print. I labeled them, dated them, sorted them into folders in my office filing cabinet that no one had touched in years. Paper didn't need login credentials. I also had Sentinel modified. A quiet tech from facilities helped me configure a backup route. Every time I badged into one of a handful of flagged rooms, compliance review, executive conference, capital approvals, the logs would mirror to our external auditors in Toronto. No company network, no filters, just clean, time-stamped files sent out like clockwork. That was when the calendar ping hit. Subject: operational realignment discussion. Location: main glass conference room. Attendees: Bryn, Dorian, me. I didn't need a briefing to know what that meant. A custodial supervisor I'd known since back when Northbridge still used punch clocks pulled me aside later that morning. Said he overheard a board member in the elevator joke about trimming the old compliance anchor. He said it like he was sorry just to repeat it. So I got ready. I didn't bring my laptop, just the envelope. Inside was Tessa's spreadsheet with the bonus triggers, my full Sentinel event report on the ventilator failure, and a short, plain language summary of everything the board had ignored or buried since the first round of efficiency updates. Before I left my office, I looked up at the shelf. There was Kincaid's photo, faded print, frame cracked at one corner, taken the day he handed me the red striped badge. He looked serious, but calm. The way people look when they know they've already done their part and someone else has to carry it now. I clipped the badge to my belt where it showed. If they were going to fire me, they were going to do it staring at the stripe. Then I walked out, down the hall, past the brand posters and LED mission statements, and into the room they'd picked for my burial. Dorian was already sitting when I walked in. He looked up, saw the envelope in my hand, and blinked like it threw off his rhythm. Bryn was standing near the window, tapping her tablet, not even pretending to be surprised to see me. I didn't give them a speech. I walked in like I belonged there, stayed on my feet at the end of the table, and slid the envelope to Dorian with one slow push. He hesitated, then pulled it closer like it might explode. I looked at Bryn, waited until she looked back and said, "Let's begin." The moment I stepped into the room, I knew they'd picked it on purpose. That glass conference box was always a few degrees colder than the rest of the floor. Something about the airflow, or maybe it was just tradition for uncomfortable conversations. Bryn sat at the head of the table, scrolling like this was any other Thursday. Dorian was already sweating, fingers twitching near the folder in front of him. She didn't waste time. "First, I want to thank you for your years of service," she said without looking up. "But Northbridge is moving forward, from rules and fear toward trust and empowerment. Your role, unfortunately, doesn't fit that vision." Dorian slid the folder toward me like it might bite him. "Standard separation package," he muttered. "Includes mutual respect clauses, non-disclosure language, and a generous payout for the transition." Still couldn't meet my eyes. I didn't even reach for it. "Help me understand something," I said. "How does firing the guy who files Sentinel event reports make anyone safer?" Bryn finally looked up. "You're stuck in an old compliance mindset. You've scared good people away from innovation with your constant surveillance and reporting. We're trying to build something better." She glanced at the wall clock. "Security will be here shortly. If you'd like to make this dramatic, I suggest you do it quickly." I didn't flinch. I reached down, unclipped my badge from my belt, and set it beside the manila envelope like a final piece in a puzzle. "Dorian," I said, calm and clear, "read the serial on the back of that card." He looked confused at first, then turned it over. His lips moved as he read the small etched numbers, then froze. I watched every bit of color drain from his face. "That's not just any badge," I said. "It's an active Sentinel device. That means this meeting, right now, is being logged and analyzed externally." His eyes darted to the laptop in front of him. I nodded. "Go ahead," I said. "Scan it." His hands shook as he plugged in a portable reader and held the badge against the scanner. A soft chime. Then the screen lit up. Logs started rolling. Entries, timestamps, screen captures, executive meetings, capital reviews, staffing calls. Every room I'd badged into for months was there, along with digital snapshots of whatever had been projected or shared. Then it hit the current session, a live record. The system flagged the conversation we were having under a new tag, potential retaliatory action against internal reporter, tied directly to the envelope Dorian had just touched. Right on cue, his email chimed. I watched it hit. Alert from the outside auditors, copied to Eamon Price and the board's risk chair. Summary report attached. Budget manipulation, deferred maintenance, off-books consultants, all tied directly to Bryn's approvals. She stood suddenly, grabbing her tablet. "No," I said. "Too late." She tapped at the screen anyway, but the sync wheel kept spinning. The board's IT had already started revoking her back-end access. Her app stuttered, froze, blinked out. She turned to Dorian, furious. "You let this happen?" He didn't answer, just stared at the screen. A knock at the door. Mac Doyle stepped in. Security director, former Marine, never said more than he had to. Two officers flanked him, both calm but ready. "What's going on?" Bryn snapped. "We've been instructed by the board," Mac said evenly. "You're required downstairs for a closed executive session. You'll come with us." He stays. He nodded toward me. Bryn's eyes narrowed as she looked at me. "This is what you do when you feel threatened. Burn the whole place down?" "No," I said. "I just lit a fuse under the lies. What burns is up to you." She stepped toward the door, stopped long enough to deliver one last shot. "Bitter old men like you are always afraid of strong women." I didn't blink. "Strong leaders don't hide behind dashboards." She walked out, heels loud against the polished floor. The guards didn't touch her, didn't need to. When the door shut behind her, the silence came down hard. Dorian and I sat there with the badge between us, the laptop screen still glowing, and a shared understanding neither of us had words for. Project Sentinel, the thing they'd ignored, buried, tried to retire, had just flipped the entire command structure in under 10 minutes. The door hadn't even finished closing behind Bryn before the room started filling with people I usually only saw on email headers. External auditors in sharp suits, internal risk managers looking like they'd just swallowed thumbtacks. Eamon Price's face appeared on the big wall screen from wherever the board kept him when things got messy. Nobody made small talk. They all wanted to know what I had. So I walked them through Sentinel's logs like I was giving a crime scene tour. Showed them where the offshore consulting bills were buried in reallocated budgets, flagged the capital freezes on life-saving equipment, pulled up email chains where incident reports were reworded into minor quality variances to avoid red flags, played clips of staffing calls where cost savings were directly tied to employee exits. Dorian stayed quiet for most of it, jaw clenched, eyes bouncing between the screen and the folder still sitting in front of him. When we hit the section about bonus structures linked to voluntary separations, I saw one of the risk officers actually curse under his breath. It took hours. By the time I made it home, my back was aching from the stiff conference chair and my phone was already buzzing. Lila had texted me a link, some long think piece Bryn had gotten published before the headlines could catch up. She called herself a modernizer, claimed she'd been forced out by old medicine, and painted a shadowy picture of a nameless compliance obstructionist who'd sabotaged her reforms with unauthorized data manipulation. And the worst part? The comments were full of people nodding along, praising her leadership, calling her brave, saying the system had always resisted change. The next morning, I walked into another meeting, smaller but louder. Eamon's voice thundered through the speakerphone. "We've taken a reputational hit here," he barked. "This should have been managed more discreetly. It's possible certain individuals let this become too adversarial." He didn't say my name. He didn't need to. Dorian cleared his throat. Everything that came out was backed by Sentinel logs. Most of it was based on directives signed by Bryn and Jace, and the auditors have their own copy now. Trying to spin this against him would only raise more questions. While they went back and forth, I heard a knock on my office door. It was Tessa. No smile this time. Just a printed email thread in her hand. "I kept this," she said, in case anyone tried to pretend it didn't happen. The thread showed Bryn and Jace coaching department heads on how to encourage voluntary exits without leaving a paper trail of age discrimination. Code words, vague pressure, and soft penalties built to wear people down. "I'm done covering for them," she said. "I want at least one other person to know what they made me process." I took it straight to Dorian. "What can we release publicly that doesn't touch patient info?" I asked him. Because Bryn's already out there spinning a story, and she didn't pick a courtroom, she picked the internet. With legal's green light, we cleared several audio clips from Sentinel. One had Bryn laughing about excess staff over 40. Another showed her comparing the price of a malpractice payout to the cost of replacing ICU monitors. We also sent a quiet packet to the Office of the Inspector General, with a full write-up on how the island-based optimization firm was tied back to a trust in Bryn's family name. Less than 24 hours later, the story flipped. The same accounts that called her a visionary were sharing clips of her mocking bedside nurses. Podcasts played her laughing about burnout being a branding problem. Editorials followed. I sat in my office with a cup of the old cheap coffee. Marla had already brought the regular pot back and watched it happen. Didn't feel like a win, Just felt like the truth had finally gotten loud enough to be heard over the noise. A couple days after the headlines flipped and the clips made their rounds, Eamon asked to meet. Same glass conference room where Bryn once tried to walk me out with a pat on the back and a muzzle in writing. This time it was just the two of us. He shook my hand like it hurt him to do it. "You protected the institution," he said. "I won't pretend this was clean, but you showed courage. You upheld your duty." Then he slid the packet across the table. "Early retirement, full pension, bonus payout large enough to pay off my mortgage, fix my knees, and maybe even buy that porch in Montana I used to joke about." It was an incredible deal. I flipped the packet open and started reading. The catch came a few pages in, under a block of tiny gray text. "Turn in the Sentinel badge. Allow the archive to be sunsetted after the formal investigation ended. Sign a non-disclosure clause that barred me from discussing internal decisions without written board approval." I sat there with that paper in my hands, and for a second, I let myself picture it. Silence. No more battles. No more meetings where someone in marketing explained nursing ratios to me like they were pitching a product. Just quiet mornings, real coffee, Lila texting me dumb links, and my name slowly fading from everyone's inbox. Then I thought of the collapsed ceiling. The family who buried someone because of bad concrete and good connections. I thought of Hank, standing in that hallway reeking of oil and regret, telling me he'd begged for parts nobody funded. I thought of the nurse who held that man's life in her hands and didn't stop until her wrists locked up. I set the packet down, tore it in half, and slid the pieces back across the table. I'm not the one who needs to disappear. Eamon's face didn't move at first. Then he went stiff in the chair and started threading his fingers together. "You know," he said, "the board could still frame this differently. A breakdown in internal communication. Maybe you overstepped your mandate. These things can get lonely if you don't have institutional support." I didn't raise my voice, just looked him in the eye. "Those logs don't just show Bryn's screw-ups. They show every board nod, every approval, every meeting where your people let it slide. If you come for me, I'll protect myself the only way someone like me can. And how's that? With daylight." He didn't respond right away, just sat there, watching the badge where it lay on the table. Then he sighed, rubbed his temples, and asked, "What would it take for you to stay?" I told him, straight, no sugar. A direct reporting line to the board's audit committee, total control over safety and maintenance escalation, system-wide. A title that made it clear I wasn't some optional window dressing they could shove back under communications next quarter. 1 week later, Marla Jensen from HR, back in charge after they reassigned Tessa to rebuild the department, walked into my office and handed me a formal letter. "Chief Integrity Officer," it read, and under it, in plain terms, the authority I'd asked for. She didn't say much, just nodded once and walked out. That was enough. Through Lila's alerts and a few careful updates from Dorian, I kept up with the fallout. Bryn had cut a deal. No prison, but barred from holding any healthcare leadership position again. Jace paid a fine big enough to make the papers, then slid into a consulting role in some unrelated industry. Skylar vanished as soon as his contract let him. Hank got 2 new techs and a maintenance budget that actually matched the machines we were asking him to keep running. Tessa stayed on and started rewriting HR processes from scratch. This time ones that protected real people, not just leadership comfort. The board tried once, just once, to test the water. Leaked a comment to some trade mag about internal resistance to innovation. Didn't take long for a reporter to call me. I gave one interview, just one. Told them what a failed ventilator looks like at 3 a.m, what trust costs when it's lost, what happens when leadership starts measuring care in charts and headlines instead of human bodies and broken sleep. After that, nobody floated the idea of folding compliance under PR again, at least not where I could hear it. These days, when I walk the halls at Northbridge, the noise feels different. There's less jargon, less staging. People still complain, sure, but it's about real things. Staffing ratios, broken supply carts, how many clean beds are actually open. The wellness gadgets are gone. No more scent machines in the waiting areas. No more calming light displays funded by consulting firms with tax shelter addresses. The posters on the walls are about fall prevention and hand hygiene again, not leadership quotes or brand pillars. In the staff lounge, the coffee's back to basic. A plain drip machine with a dent in the side and no QR code to scan. Nobody misses the ad screens. The nurses care more about lab results than digital joy stations, and that's exactly how it should be. Hank flags me down once in a while, just to show me something fixed. A row of freshly serviced vents, a new alarm system with real-time redundancy, or a maintenance log that finally got funding before the machines failed. He doesn't look tired in the same way he used to. He looks like someone being allowed to do his job. Down in HR, Marla and Tessa split their time between the scrubs locker area and the nurse break rooms. Less town hall, more hallway conversations. I've seen them take notes, stop mid-sentence to listen, and walk away with real work to do, not a campaign to roll out. Once a quarter, I take my seat at the far end of the boardroom. The badge stays clipped to my belt, red stripe showing. Nobody jokes about re-imaging compliance anymore, and when someone starts to pitch a creative, cost-saving method that touches safety or maintenance, I see the room tighten a little, straighten a little. Remember what happened last time. Eamon still watches me across the table with that expression like he's trying to figure out whether I'm a guard dog or a wolf. But he doesn't argue when I say we're not cutting the calibration budget, and he doesn't talk over me when Sentinel logs raise red flags. Every so often, a department lead pulls me aside in a stairwell. It's always quiet, always the same pattern. A brief nod, a low voice, and a line like, "I killed that idea before it went live. Just pictured you in the corner of the room, badge blinking." When I drive past the new wing, steel frame, reinforced ceiling, fully modern HVAC, I think about how many people pass through without knowing how close this place came to repeating history. Lila still sends me links now and then. Another op-ed about Bryn, another podcast. I don't open them anymore. I know how that story ends. Most nights I'm the last one on my floor. The lights hum low, the cleaning crew waves. It's just me and the quiet. Before I leave, I check the red indicator on my badge. If it's blinking, slow and steady, I clip it back on. Then I go home. Would you have accepted Eamon's offer and walked away or stayed and fought like I did? Drop your answer in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Before we wrap up, have you stayed quiet about something wrong at work? Tap hype, please subscribe and like, and share a comment or your own story.